Hi there, I'm Rosemary Barton. Here's what's at issue this week. The Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation's president and board of directors have resigned. A check for $140,000 donated by a Chinese businessman has raised questions, though the foundation says it has attempted to return it. The board says the foundation has become politicized, making it impossible to do its work. And the Prime Minister also says it is a victim of politics.
The Trudeau Foundation is a foundation with which I have absolutely no intersection. It is a shame to see the level of toxicity and political polarization that is going on in our country these days, but I am certain that the Trudeau Foundation will be able to continue to ensure that research into the social studies and humanities at the highest levels across Canadian academic institutions continues for many years to come.
So how damaging are these resignations for the government? What should we make of all of this? Let's bring everyone in. Chantal Hebert, Andrew Coyne and Althia Raj. Good to see you all. Andrew, why don't you start us off tonight? How is this damaging for the Liberals, beyond the fact that the foundation and the Prime Minister share a last name, and the Prime Minister obviously had a role in the foundation up until the point where he was Liberal leader and then Prime Minister?
Well, we don't know whether it's damaging to the government or the party at this point at all. But what we can say is the foundation itself has taken an enormous wound, largely self-inflicted. I think that line about, it's about polarization, it's about politicization, that might have been the day one messaging, but it basically became obsolete the day that the La Presse story came out and buttressed by reporting in the Globe and Mail on the internal warring within the foundation. Over the terms on which this mysterious donation arrived. It appears that it was not recorded properly. It was recorded to a different name than the donor, the actual donor, with a phony address in Hong Kong that was then changed to an address in Beijing, all of which might have remained undetected had they not been forced to return the funds when it was discovered that, in fact, it hadn't even come from that Chinese businessman at all. It had basically been funded by the Chinese government, who reimbursed him. And when that came out, the current directors and management of the foundation seemed to have been rather taken aback at the practices that had been allowed to take hold, particularly over this donation, under their predecessors. And they effectively, by that mass resignation was not because the press was being mean to them. It was because they had lost confidence, as several of them said off the record, in the governance of the foundation. So the foundation itself has many questions to answer. Some of the answers to those questions may start to hurt the government, but we don't know that now at all.
And to be clear, I don't think the foundation has they've tried to return the money to the original donor, but they can't even figure out where that goes. So the money's been sent somewhere, but hasn't actually been necessarily received by by the donor itself. Chantal.
I find it all mind-boggling, and not just what we saw this week with the obscure press release that seemed to be saying in coded language, it's all the Globe and Mail and the opposition parties aren't being nice to us, and it's all their fault. Which I don't think is the case. Why I find it mind-boggling? I served as a mentor at the Trudeau Foundation for a PhD student before Justin Trudeau became Liberal leader. What I saw there is that the people who make up the board, and many of the people who are mentors, are people who have a lot of political experience. Not all of them back then, at least, were Liberals, but they all knew the ropes and politics. It would have been obvious to anyone who knew politics that the sudden influx of donations from places like China after Justin Trudeau becomes Prime Minister is not a product of, the climate change. That this money, one, is coming in for a reason, and two, that the foundation, because it now bears the name of a sitting Prime Minister, will come under more scrutiny. In those circumstances, seasoned, experienced public servants and others would want to make sure that all the ducks are lined up.
Yeah.
The current board, those who resigned this week, were not around back then. But it still boggles the mind that so many people with so much experience would think it doesn't really matter that we're writing a receipt for charity purposes to one name rather than the other, or would think something other than, aren't we fortunate? We have the name of the current Prime Minister, so now money is being poured upon us. It's very, it's very sloppy, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, it would have or should have raised eyebrows at very least, Althia, you would
Back
think.
then.
Inside. Yeah, back then. Yeah. Althia?
Yeah, when you look at the list of the people who are on the board of directors, the people who form the members who appoint the board of directors, these are all people, most of them are people who would have political antennas, who would be able to say, hey, this is a problem. That being said, that may not have risen to the level where the members were informed or the board of directors is informed. Like, I don't know, but it's possible that staff decided not to alert the board of directors about this. But regardless, I think it does raise very valid questions. And I don't know if that's CRA investigating or if it is, as the Bloc Québécois leader suggested early this morning, if it should be the Auditor General investigating. But a little bit like the We Charity, this is an organization that finds itself in the limelight, and usually, you don't emerge of being stuck in the political scandal of the day with your reputation coming out squeakier than it was when you came in. But there are problems that emerge because of the focus on the organization. And this clearly is one that should have raised alarm bells, and it should be rectified because, as Chantal rightly points out, like, the Prime Minister is still the Prime Minister, at least for the next little while, and this does not seem to have been addressed at all.
Chantal, then Andrew. Chantal, yeah.
Let's be clear here. There were questions in the House of Commons about this money coming in. And the Conservative leader asking the questions was called Rona Ambrose. So there were questions asked. Even if you didn't know and you sat on the board in 2015, 16, 17, you would have said, what's this happening in the House of Commons? Why are they asking all those questions? So this did not suddenly come to light in 2023. It started to come to light back in 2016. To think that the board wouldn't think maybe we should do due diligence on this, make sure that everything is proper, and that never happened, is, I have to say, a governance issue that does cast doubts as to the future of the foundation and the students that it funds, who stand to be casualties of this.
Andrew.
We should say that beyond just the very curious handling of this very curious donation, there is a larger structural question that I think now has to be answered and people have been putting off, which is this was a foundation that was set up with $125 million in public funds.
Yes.
And yet not only was it
in 2002 or something,
not only was it in the name of a recently deceased leader of one party, but many members of the board and directors, et cetera, were either members of the Trudeau family or family friends, et cetera. And that's a very curious, and I should say, as a matter of disclosure, one of those family members is a relative of mine. But to have something managing public funds that is so clearly under the, within the ambit of a political family that is highly contentious to this day, might have been sustainable if no successor of Pierre Trudeau had then gone into politics and become Prime Minister. But to have the Prime Minister sitting there with this family foundation, essentially, even though it's publicly funded, was asking for trouble, and we got it.
Welcome back to another round of At Issue. As I was saying, Justin Trudeau marks his 10th year as leader of the Liberal Party of Canada tomorrow.
We are fed up with leaders who pit Canadians against Canadians, West against East, rich against poor, Quebec against the rest of the country, urban against rural. Canadians are looking to us, my friends. They're giving us a chance, hopeful that the party of Wilfrid Laurier can rediscover his sunny ways.
That was the Prime Minister accepting the leadership of the Liberals all the way 10 years ago, a decade ago. Even then, challenging the divisiveness of politics. How has Trudeau changed since he first took power? And is he still the best option for the party going forward? Let's bring back everybody. Chantal, Andrew, and Althia. I just love watching speeches from a decade ago because you can see how someone has evolved or changed or not. Certainly he's better at giving a speech. That's what I would start with. But Althia, I and obviously the Prime Minister has said he's not going anywhere, but I wonder how you would reflect on his time over the past 10 years in terms of whether he's done the best for the party and whether he's still the best fit as the leader.
Well, this is his party. like if you think about the next leader, they will have to basically rethink what the Liberal Party is, because Justin Trudeau has remade the party into whatever he wanted it to be, which is far more left of center, which is focused on the values that he has set out and he has developed over the past 10 years. Yeah. I would say, if not Justin Trudeau, who? And then you get a list that I'm not sure, they're quite capable cabinet ministers, Anita Anand, Chrystia Freeland, François-Philippe Champagne, but I don't think any of those people have as good a chance of beating Pierre Poilievre as Justin Trudeau does. And part of that, the themes that he was talking about in that speech are still the themes that he wants to run on again in the next election, because frankly, they are themes that suit him very well. And so, already you see that contrast being made between, the Liberals are going to say politics is a source of good. Pierre Poilievre wants to tear things down. We want to build things up, whether that's, dental care and child care and continuing the fight against climate change. And so I think it's more than just ego, although, living in Ottawa, ego is like the air that you breathe. This is about really feeling and believing that he has the best fighting chance. If he wanted to leave, he should have already suggested that he was going for the exit, because it would be the only fair thing to do for his party.
And Chantal, what is your observation in terms of how he has grown since that moment back on April 14th?
Well, one, nobody wins 3 terms and is an accident. And over the course of those terms, you must be learning something, because if the person we saw 10 years ago on April 14th was the same person who fought in the last election, he would be retired by now. He did grow in the job. Most prime ministers do. Your question was, is he the best choice for the Liberal Party? Yeah. I'll set aside Justin Trudeau's own feelings about his future. I've covered more than my share of parties that have had prime ministers in office for a decade and who have started to think the best solution for us to break through and earn more terms is to change leaders. And I'll name you 3 experiments: John Turner, Kim Campbell, and Paul Martin. So if anyone can
those are good examples of the point, yes.
for all the columns that I'm going to get to read over the next few days that say it's time for the Liberal Party to go for a new leader and give itself a new springboard in opinion polls, well, yeah, sure, as long as it lasts until election day, and in all these cases, it kind of did not.
Andrew.
Well, he certainly, as Althia said, he owns this party. Remember, the circumstances in which he came to lead the party was they were facing an existential crisis. They'd been nearly crushed in the 2011 election. There was real questions about what was a third party, what was a centrist party still relevant for, and they decided essentially to put aside all those questions and just haul out the big name. And they rode his coattails back to power. They rode an extraordinarily well-run 2015 campaign, one of the campaigns for the ages. But also the circumstances by the method by which it was chosen, this method of not just one member, one vote, but you didn't even have to be a member, means that there's no real serious organization available to anybody who might even think of challenging him. So to some extent, it's all a moot point. That being said, yes, he's grown in some ways through experience. He's also been diminished. The sunny ways label simply would be laughed off the court at this point after all the scandals, after all the broken promises, after the divisive wedge politics, et cetera. So they managed to squeak through with the benefit, I might say, of some rather weak opposition in the terms of the Conservatives and the Conservative leaders. But they lost 2 consecutive votes in the popular vote. They're stuck below 30%. In ordinary circumstances, a party like this would be starting to look around, would be starting to warm people up in the bullpen. But I agree, you might be facing defeat in the next election, but you might be facing worse defeat with somebody else. And in particular, the fix that the party is in is they're so toxic west of Ontario. They get so few seats west of Ontario that they basically have to have a leader who can win a bunch of seats in Quebec to have any chance of forming a government. And that generally means having a leader from Quebec. So the question for any potential leadership rival or successor is, could they hold on to the number of seats the Liberals have in Quebec right now? And that would be a very open question.
Chantal, then Althia. Yep.
So when Jean Chrétien left or was forced out, he left a party that was riding high in public opinion to a successor who was popular in Quebec. But Jean Chrétien himself had become popular in Quebec because of the decision to stay out of Iraq. Yeah. And that all vanished. Now, it's not to diminish people who hope to succeed Justin Trudeau to say that none of them is Paul Martin in Quebec or elsewhere. And brings that kind of gravitas to wanting to succeed Justin Trudeau. I agree with Andrew. At this point in Quebec, there is very little rancor against Justin Trudeau. Someone this week, and I was struck, not someone in politics, said apparently they don't like Justin Trudeau out there. She meant outside Quebec. And I thought this is a reversal of what I've usually seen of Quebecers saying we dislike the Prime Minister. So I think if it rides on keeping Quebec and Ontario, Justin Trudeau at this point is a better choice than an untried leader.
Althia.
Well, a lot continues in 12 months or 24 months. And that's the coalition that we have at the moment. But that's not to say that if politics gets very divisive, if Pierre Poilievre takes a hard right turn, that there aren't people in urban areas in Western Canada who think, well, we need somebody else, and who, all these people that we talked about and even more that we haven't mentioned are still organizing. They're organizing much more quietly than they were before, but they're still letting it be known that they're interested in the job. And so I think that I'm not sure that the coalition that we have at the moment is necessarily going to be the coalition for a future Liberal leader, I guess is what I'm saying.
One other
by
thing,
coalition, you mean the people that want to make
the people who support him
leader.
and who would vote for that person.
Yeah. Last word to you, Andrew.
Well, one other thing we should say is this is the second successive government where the power is so centralized in the office of the Prime Minister that you can really count on less than one hand the cabinet ministers who really matter or could potentially succeed them. So the one consequence of this centralization of power is it's making the succession for each of these parties, Conservative and Liberal, it's making for weak lineups of potential successors.
Okay, I got to leave it there. That was a fascinating discussion. Thank you all. Appreciate it.